The fog clung to Black Hollow. It was a living thing, slithering through the gnarled trees and crumbling headstones. The moon, a pale sliver, did little to pierce the oppressive darkness. The air hung heavy, thick with the stench of decay and the promise of unseen horrors. This was no place for the living, yet here he was. Guts, the Black Swordsman, trudged onward. His massive sword, Dragonslayer, was slung across his back, its weight a familiar burden. Beside him floated Puck, his ethereal companion. The small elf shivered, his usual cheer dimmed by the oppressive atmosphere. "Even for you, Guts, this place is grim," Puck remarked, his voice barely a whisper. "We move," Guts growled, his one eye scanning the shadows. They had been drawn to Black Hollow by rumors. Whispers of a haunting, of a malevolent entity preying on the local villagers. These were the battles Guts was cursed to fight. His path was one of blood and shadow, a never-ending struggle against the darkness that threatened to consume the world. Black Hollow was a place of whispers and shadows. It was a place where the veil between the mortal realm and the abyss was thin. Guts could feel it, a tingling sensation that ran down his spine, a primal awareness of the unseen forces at play. He tightened his grip on Dragonslayer's hilt, ready to face whatever awaited them in the heart of the fog. They pressed deeper into the fog, the path disappearing beneath their feet. The silence was broken only by the crunch of dead leaves and the occasional mournful cry of a night bird. The further they walked, the colder it became, a bone-chilling chill that seemed to seep into their very souls. "Did you hear that?" Puck suddenly whispered, his voice tight with apprehension. Guts stopped, his senses on high alert. At first he heard nothing but the wind whistling through the trees. Then he heard it, a faint sound like the whisper of a voice on the wind. It was a mournful, chilling sound filled with an unspeakable sorrow. "Which way?" Guts asked, his voice barely audible. He trusted Puck's hearing more than his own in this unnatural stillness. The elf pointed towards the heart of the hollow, where the fog seemed to gather, swirling like a cauldron. They moved cautiously, their steps slow and deliberate. Dragonslayer held at the ready. The whispers grew louder as they approached their destination, twisting into mournful wails that seemed to tear at the edges of their sanity. Guts felt a presence now, vast and malevolent, watching them from the swirling fog. He knew that they were walking into the belly of the beast, but turning back was not an option, not while innocence suffered. The fog parted, revealing their destination. It was an ancient chapel half swallowed by the earth, its stone walls crumbling and overgrown with ivy. The once ornate windows were now empty sockets, staring out blindly into the night. A single gnarled tree stood sentinel beside the entrance, its branches twisted into grotesque shapes. "A house of God," Puck murmured, his voice tinged with unease. "Though it feels far from holy now." The air around the chapel was thick with a palpable sense of dread. It was as if the very stones themselves were stained with the residue of countless horrors. Guts felt a chill run down his spine, and he knew that whatever awaited them within those crumbling walls was not of this world. He pushed open the heavy oak doors, their rusted hinges groaning in protest. The interior of the chapel was shrouded in darkness, the only light filtering in through the gaps in the decaying roof. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, and the silence was broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water from the leaky ceiling. As their eyes adjusted to the gloom, they could make out the remnants of pews, long since rotted and broken. The altar at the far end of the chapel was in ruins, the statue that once stood upon it shattered and defiled. And standing amidst the ruins, bathed in a faint, ethereal light, was a woman. The woman turned, her face pale and gaunt in the dim light. Her eyes, wide and vacant, seemed to burn with an unnatural intensity. In her hands she clutched a small, ornate box, its surface covered in strange symbols. "He betrayed me," she whispered. her voice a dry rasp that echoed through the ruined chapel. "He promised me eternity, but left me to rot." Guts took a step forward, his hand resting on Dragonslayer's hilt. "Who betrayed you?" he asked, his voice low and steady. He had faced down demons and monsters before. He knew that sometimes the greatest horrors wore the faces of men, but something about this woman, something about the raw, desperate grief that emanated from her gave him pause. The woman's grip tightened on the box, her knuckles turning white. He called himself a priest, a man of God, she hissed, her voice thick with hatred. But he was a liar, a deceiver. He stole my heart, my soul, and then he offered them to something dark and hungry. As she spoke, a transformation began to overtake her. Her skin turned pale and translucent, her eyes glowing with an eerie red light. Her fingers elongated, morphing into sharp claws, and her teeth sharpened into fangs. The air grew cold as the scent of decay intensified, and Guts knew that he was no longer dealing with a grieving woman. "I will have my revenge!" the creature shrieked, its voice no longer human. "And you will help me!" She lunged at Guts, the box falling open to reveal a swirling vortex of darkness. The battle had begun.